Hello students, today I will discuss about international trade. After the discussion, you will be able to understand the international trade, import and exports, comparative advantages, other possible benefits of trading globally, free trade versus protectionism, free trade, what is protectionism, and I will discuss about different organizations in the world such as GATT, General Agreement on Trade and Tariff, United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, that is known as UNCTAD, WTO, different issues related to WTO such as major trade blocs of the world, European Union, about European Free Trade Association, about the Council for Mutual Economic Assistance, about the Latin American Free Trade Association, about the ASEAN, that means Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and I will also discuss about OPEC. I will discuss little bit about the African blocs, OECD. You may be knowing about Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. You may be knowing about CIS, Commonwealth of Independent States, APEC, Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, and I will discuss few issues related to that. If you can walk into a supermarket and find Costa Rican bananas, Brazilian coffee and bottle of South African wine, you are experiencing the impact of international trade. International trade allows countries to expand their market and access goods and services that otherwise may not have been available domestically. As a result of international trade, the market is more competitive. This ultimately results in more competitive pricing and brings a cheaper product home to the consumer. International trade is the exchange of goods and services between countries. Trading globally gives consumers and countries the opportunity to be exposed to goods and services not available in their own countries or which would be more expensive domestically. The importance of international trade was recognized early on by the political economists like Adam Smith and David Ricardo. Still, some argue that international trade actually can be bad for smaller nations, putting them at a greater disadvantages on the world stage. So now let me make you clear what is international trade. International trade was key to the rise of global economy. In the global economy, supply and demand and thus prices both impact, and they are impacted by global events. Political change in Asia, for example, could result in an increase in the cost of labor. This could increase the manufacturing cost for an American sneakers company that is based in Malaysia, which would thus result in an increase in the price charged for a pair of sneakers that an American consumer might purchase at their local mall. So now let me explain you a little bit about import and export, because these are the terms related with international trade. A product that is sold to the global market is called an export, and a product that is bought from the global market is an import. So import and exports are accounted for in the current account section in a country's balance of payment. Globally, trade allows wealthy countries to use their resources, for example, labor, technology or capital, more efficiently. Different countries are endowed with different assets and natural resources such as land, labor, capital and technology, etc. This allows some countries to produce the same good more efficiently. In other words, I can say that more quickly and with less of a cost. Therefore, they may sell it more cheaply than other countries. If a country cannot efficiently produce an item, it can obtain it by trading with another country that can. This is known as specialization in international trade. For instance, England and Portugal have historically both benefits by specializing and trading according to their comparative advantages. Portugal has plentiful vineyards and can make wine at a low cost, while England is able to more cheaply manufacture clothes, given its pastures are full of sheep. Each country would eventually recognize these facts and stop attempting to make the product that was costlier to generate domestically in favor of engaging in trade. Indeed, over time, England stopped producing wine and Portugal stopped manufacturing cloth. Both countries saw that it was to their advantage to stop their efforts to producing these items at home and instead to trade with each other in order to acquire them. So I hope you now understood what is export and import. And now let me explain you the comparative advantage. These two countries realized that they could produce more by focusing on those products which they have a comparative advantage. In such a case, the Portuguese would begin to produce only wine and the English only cotton. Each country can now create a specialized output of 20 units per year and trade equal proportion of both products. As such, each country now has access to both products at lower cost. So we can see then that both countries, the opportunity cost of producing both products are greater than cost of specializing. Comparative advantage can be contrasted with absolute advantage. Absolute advantage leads to unambiguous gains from specialization and trade only in cases where each producer has an absolute advantage in producing some goods. If a producer lacks any absolute advantage, then they would never export anything. But we do see that countries without any clear absolute advantage do gain from trade because they have comparative advantage. Now, apart from this, there are other possibilities also of benefiting of trading globally. Let me explain you. International trade not only results in increased efficiencies, but it also allows countries to participate in a global economy, encouraging the opportunity for foreign direct investment, that is known as FDI. In theory, economies can thus grow more efficiently and can more easily become competitive economic participants. FDI is a means by which foreign currency and expertise can enter the country. It raises employment levels and theoretically leads to a growth in gross domestic product. For the investor, FDI offers companies expansion and growth, which means higher revenues. Now let me explain you other concepts related to international trade. These are free trade and protectionism. I will explain you in a comparative manner, free trade versus protectionism. As with all theories, there are opposing views. International trade has two contrasting views regarding the level of control placed on trade between countries. You may be thinking, what is free trade? Free trade is the simpler of the two theories. This approach is also sometimes referred to as laissez-faire economics. With a laissez-faire approach, there are no restriction on trade. The main idea is that supply and demand factors operating on a global scale that will ensure production happens efficiently. Therefore, nothing need to be done to protect or promote trade and growth because market forces will do it automatically. Now you may be thinking, what is protectionism? Protectionism holds that regulation of international trade is important to ensure that market functions properly. Advocates of this theory believe that market inefficiencies may hamper the benefit of international trade and they aim to guide the market accordingly. Protectionism exists in many different forms, but the most common are tariff, subsidies and quotas. These strategies attempt to correct any inefficiency in the international market. Now, after that, I will explain the trade organization in the world. Post-World Wars, many countries of the world began to unify into several economic commercial blocs in order to save their commercial interest. GATT and UNCTAD played a major role in bridging the gulf between developed and developing countries. Now, let me explain you General Agreement on Trade and Tariff (GATT). The system of world trade that had matured in the late 19th century was disturbed by World War I and World War II. To develop the international trade among nations, the General Agreement of Tariff and Trade had been signed in Geneva in 1947. It was ratified and did go into effect. GATT was essentially two things: First was a complex network of over 200 interrelated bilateral trade agreements and a series of rules, all designed to lower tariff and eliminate non-tariff barriers to trade. The original 23 adherents to GATT were joined by well over 100 more. The large tariff cutting conferences of GATT, held approximately every 5 years, reduced or eliminated tariff on many thousands of items. The rule against discriminatory trade practices, dumping and other non-tariff barriers to trade are usually followed, although in Japan also, the USA and other countries do violate them from time to time. And the rules of GATT governed some 85% of international trade. The principle of most favored nation, you may be knowing this term, MFN. This clause was incorporated to bilateral trade agreement, and this practice helped in reducing tariff. United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD. UNCTAD is a permanent organ of the United Nations General Assembly, established in December 1964. The basic objective was to promote trade, investment and development in developing countries. Its headquarters is located in Geneva, Switzerland. UNCTAD has approximately 190 members. Negotiations at UNCTAD's meeting resulted in the Global System of the Trade Preferences in 1988, an agreement that reduced tariff and removed or reduced non-tariff trade barriers among participating developing countries, the Common Fund for Commodities in 1989. An intergovernmental financial institution that provides assistance to developing countries that are heavily dependent on the commodity exports, and various agreements for debt relief. In the 1990s, UNCTAD's efforts were directed towards the challenges such as globalization poses to developing countries, and a special attention was focused on measures to help the poorest and least developed countries that became integrated into world economy. Now, after that, I will explain a bit about World Trade Organization. The World Trade Organization is the only global organization dealing with the rules of trade between nations. At its heart are the WTO agreements, negotiated and signed by the bulk of the world trading nations and ratified in their parliament. The goal is to ensure that trade flows are smoothly, predictably and freely as possible. So you may be thinking that what are the characteristics of WTO? The WTO has many roles. It operates a global system of trade rules. It acts as a forum for negotiating trade agreements. It settles trade disputes between its members, and it supports the need of developing countries. All major decisions are made by WTO's member governments, either by ministers, who usually meet at least every 2 years, or by their ambassadors or delegates who meet regularly in Geneva. A number of simple fundamental principles form the foundation of the multilateral trading system. The primary purpose of the WTO is to open trade for all the benefited countries. Now you may be thinking about the decision making. The WTO's top decision making body is the Ministerial Conference. I will give a description about the Geneva Council and various other councils and committees. Ministerial conferences usually take place every 2 years. The General Council is the top day-to-day decision-making body. It meets a number of times a year in Geneva. So far as membership is concerned, the WTO has over 160 members representing 98% of the world trade. Over 20 countries are seeking to join WTO. To join the WTO, a government has to bring its economy and trade policies in the line that WTO rules and negotiate its terms of entry with WTO membership. Major trade blocs of the world. European Union is a coalition of 27. Britain bowed out from the Union in 2019. European countries designed to tear down the trade, economic and social barriers and promote flourishing in these areas. Established in 1993, the European Union's headquarters are currently located in Brussels, Belgium. The European Union is governed by three main bodies: the EU Council, the EU Parliament and the EU Commission. The Council's main job is to create and propose new policies and legislation for a European Union. It operates under a different EU president every 6 months. Additionally, the European Central Bank services that EU's financial needs and manages things like inflation rates and foreign exchange reserves. Now you may be knowing about the EFTA, that is known as the European Free Trade Association. This organization came into existence in 1960 with Britain, Ireland, Norway, Austria, Sweden, Portugal and Switzerland as members. Later, Britain and Ireland joined the EEC, where the Finland joined it. These countries have the maximum per capita income among all the European countries. The basic objective of EFTA countries is to conduct free trade among member countries in order to increase their exports and imports. Next one is the Council for Mutual Economic Assistance. This organization of communist countries was formed as a parallel organization to those of Western Europe in 1948. Earlier it was called as CMEA, former Soviet Union, Bulgaria, Hungary, East Germany, former Mongolia, Poland, Romania, Czechoslovakia and Albania. These were among the leading members. Next one is the Latin American Free Trade Association. This organization was formed by Latin American countries in 1960. The member countries included Peru, Paraguay, Argentina, Mexico, Brazil and Chile. These countries provide raw material and market to the developing countries. Their economic development is limited by several factors. They have a low standard of living in general. These countries have branded as developing nations. They have formed a trade bloc to safeguard their economic and commercial interests, but they have not succeeded because of the imposing developing nations. These countries have an insignificant contribution in the world trade. Another organization is the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. This organization came into existence in 1975 with Malaysia, Thailand, Philippines, Indonesia, Singapore and West ASEAN, and Brunei is also a member. Their prolonged slavery has been responsible for their colonial economic structure, leading to several undesirable economic, social and political problems. During the colonial rule, the imperialists were more interested in exploiting their plantation crop, mineral and markets. It has resulted in economic imbalances. These countries are now trying to get proper prices for their products so as to improve the standard of living of their people. They are also trying hard for industrial development. Vietnam has also joined it recently. Another organization is the South Asian Preferential Trading Agreement. The South Asian Preferential Trading Agreement was constituted at Dhaka Summit of the SAARC countries in 1993. It has given a facelift to trade activities of defunct SAARC. India has removed custom duties on 226 items since January 96, but Pakistan has not reciprocated and does not include India into MFN list. Although 541 items from India can be directly imported by private parties in Pakistan, other items are restricted, which is contradictory to MFN principle. MFN means most favored nations. The SAPTA intends to convert into SAFTA, that is South Asian Free Trade Association, which is a desirable beginning in the direction of economic integration among SAARC countries. The ADBA has set up a SAARC fund for a regional project which proves the point. In April 1997, India, Nepal, Bangladesh and Bhutan have set up SAGAR for integrated efforts in the field of environmental protection, energy development, transport, trade and tourism development. In the same year, the outline of BIMSTEC was drawn for free trade among Bangladesh, India, Myanmar, Sri Lanka and Thailand. Another important organization is OPEC. This organization was formed by leading oil-producing countries of the world in 1972. Due to increasing demand for petroleum after 1960, the oil-producing countries continued to increase the prices of the petroleum. The average price of $2 per barrel between 1960 and 72 was increased to $30 after 1973. Consequently, Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, UAE, Gabon, Algeria, Libya, Egypt, Venezuela and Indonesia formed these organizations to keep the oil prices under control. However, lack of coordination among members and the Iran-Iraq conflict weakened the organization, resulting into lowering the oil prices to $13 per barrel. During the Iraq-Kuwait war, price again soared to $40 a barrel. At present, this organization exerts substantial pressure, particularly on the developed countries which are its main buyers. It has 13 members. After this, let me explain you little bit about the Commonwealth countries. The Commonwealth is a loose association of former British colonies, dependencies and other territories, and Mozambique, which has no historical ties to Britain. It is a membership of 53 states. The fall of British imperialism led to the formation of this organization. Britain played a vital role in its formation. After the World War II, the countries of Asia and Africa became independent from British rule. Britain tried to make these countries members of the organization to safeguard its own interest. In 1973, Britain joined the EEC, and the organization has ceased to be effective. After discussing different associations, let me also discuss a little bit about African blocs. Africa has been the worst hit continent at the hands of imperialists during the colonial era. The European power divided Africa among themselves and brought in untold exploitation of the resources and the people of the continent. Even after the African countries gained their freedom, at least 18 of them were co-opted by EEC so as to continue their domain over these countries. In fact, these 18 countries were the main supplier of raw material and markets for the European manufacturing goods. African countries have also tried to form associations so that they develop themselves economically. Among these associations were the West African Economic Community for West African States, Organization of African Unity. These are the noble, though their success is yet to be ascertained in the wake of interference by outside forces. And after this, I will describe about the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD. This organization was formed in 1961 to replace the Organization for European Economic Cooperation, which was started immediately after the World War II for the reconstruction of the war-ravaged European states. The OECD also collects the disseminate economic and environmental information. It has a member of 30 states. These countries are Australia, Austria, Belgium, Canada, Czech Republic, Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, Greece, Hungary, Ireland, Iceland, Italy, Japan, Luxembourg, Mexico, Netherlands, New Zealand, Norway, Poland, Portugal, Slovakia, South Korea, Spain, Switzerland, Sweden, Turkey, UK and US. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I will also describe a little bit about the Commonwealth Independent States. The Commonwealth of Independent States (CIS) was created in December 1991 upon the disbanding of the Soviet Union. It is made up of 12 of the 15 former Soviet constituent republics. Members in 1995 included Armenia, Azerbaijan, Belarus, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Moldova, Russia, Tajikistan, Ukraine, Uzbekistan, etc. The capital of the Commonwealth is in Belarus. After that, I will describe a little bit about the Asian Pacific Economic Cooperation. It was founded in 1989 to further cooperation on trade and investment between nations of the region and rest of the world. It has 21 member states. These are Australia, Canada, Chile, China, Hong Kong, Indonesia, Japan, Malaysia, Mexico, New Zealand, Peru, and 2 more countries. International trade is key for the survival of any country in the world. Due to specialized need and services, each country has to import and export products with other countries. International trade and trade blocs help in it. I hope after this lecture, you are now able to understand different concepts such as import, export, comparative advantages, and different organizations which are functioning in this domain.